Is there a way for us to get the support, skilled support, at the home so that they have their privacy, they are around the people who they love and care, and at the same time get the support that they require during birth?
Yeah.
So that I think gets missed out when we assume that everything about birth is risky.
This is the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that brings us alive, that burns myths and opens a channel of authentic natural birth stories. This show debunks the many myths of the medicalized births, showcases the plethora of choices a pregnant couple can make to embark on their empowered birth journey. I'm Divya Kapoor, a certified birth and lactation counselor and an aspiring traditional birth attendant. Let's get the flames blazing high. Welcome to episode 116, a very cliche introduction to this episode after the mini winter break. So, thank you so much for staying put and waiting for this episode. We were to name this Media's Role in Denouncing Birth as Unsafe. And part of the reason why we wanted to do that was after an article and a series of articles that have come out of late um, speaking about home births as essentially risky, and the police, the lobbying involved, and taking the parents into custody without trying to understand what happened, what were the reasons, and some of the language around that has been very biased and indicating that birth in and itself is risky, not looking at the physiology, the magic, the beauty around birth. And there can be a lot of balance out there when we write articles, as well as point out the risks, point out what needs to be pointed out. But you cannot take an autonomy out of a parent's hand when you cover something from a very authoritative place. So we were anyway talking about that, and then Effath Yasmin ma'am, in her Instagram post, called out the poor journalism in it, called out the way home births were spoken about, and also in a way established that they have been around forever and they will be. So if you really want to save, if you really want to have better safety for the mother and the baby, how about embrace the fact that what we are doing right now is not okay. But it can only happen when we ask better questions, which is the reason we sat together. And the episode is here today. Effath Yasmin ma'am, as I speak further into the episode, is one of the pioneering lactation consultants of India. She has a documentary to her name. She has numerous accolades, international accolades to her name. And I speak about her further into the episode. In this episode, we particularly speak about the language around birth. So, along the line, when we recorded the episode, something switched. And since we had covered all in all about birth, right from preconception to breastfeeding, the impact of the language we use around birth, which includes media, since this was more holistic in its approach as an episode, it has been renamed to the language around birth and breastfeeding. Before we enter the episode, I would like to read out the articles covering both home births and hospital births in a very similar situation, and how the language there is very different to give you a context of where we're coming from. So, in November 2024, there was a birth wherein health officials said that there is no law to stop home births from happening, and that's the headline. So, an investigation into the case, and this is by the Indian Express, the New Indian Express, a leading channel in India. An investigation into the case of a 36-year-old man performing home birth for his wife has brought up to light the possibility of several such cases happening across the state. Uh, the man performed home birth for his wife. You would understand how misplaced the language right here is. The wife is not giving birth, the husband is. And then it's written that the wife gave birth to their third child at home. The couple already had two children before. When the village health nurses called them over the phone, he challenged them to take legal action against them. When health officials contacted him, he told them about a group from where they learned all about it, and they went ahead and had the birth that they wanted. The article further points out that at present there is no law prohibiting home births by untrained people, meaning the husband and the wife, so I cannot take action against them. Such incidents have been repeatedly happening. Luckily, in this case, the mother and the baby are safe, a health department official said. Further on, it says that, so not in this article, I think I read another article where, from another leading channel where they spoke about this being a new fad. But just from here, as a listener, as somebody who's had babies yourself, if you're coming for, if you're a regular listener, you would understand what I mean when I say, luckily they had a good birth, as if in the medical system, someone else performs the birth for the mother, someone else does it for her, and she doesn't have to birth, and that's the illusion. When the mother goes to the hospital and realizes that she has to do it herself, she's taken aback. And then there was another article by The Hindu wherein it was covering the death of a mother at a home birth. And it called out that it's a new fad. But religious considerations, people's mistrust of all medical interventions, and of late some new fads, such as birth villages, which glorify the all natural, holistic childbirth experience, often promoted by social media influencers, have been persuading more people to experiment with home births. Now, birth village is the name of a birth center that has been around for some time. It's a legal entity that provides a home like setup and helps women have physiological births. They are in tie up with obstetrics and they do follow all the protocols. So, calling birth villages stood out for me because there are no such birth villages otherwise. That is the main focus of that. And this article, I don't know, is written by who, but the way it's portrayed is that hoping for an all natural, holistic childbirth experience is a fad. Hoping for a beautiful birth experience is a fad. It is a concern for us that this segment has been growing, and surprisingly, some sections of the well heeled are willing to fall for this, as if it's a scam. Home births are a scam. Birth centers are a scam. This is completely biased. There are previous instances in a South Indian district, I'm not naming particular places here, where such beautiful childbirth experiences going wrong and mothers having to be pulled back from the brink of death, says a senior obstetrician. So these are the thoughts of a senior obstetrician, and understandably so. But for the new media channel to cover only this aspect on a home birth was scary, because we are not ready to look at why the numbers of home births are rising. What's the problem? The problem is never ever mentioned in these. And then there's another article wherein I'm just Googling, I'm saying deaths in a hospital. Or maybe just say hospital birth news in India. I'll read the one that has been posted an hour ago. I'm going to read the one which was written at the same time that this home birth was covered, where the mother and the baby were fine. So this is the BBC News. At least 10 newborns have died in a fire at a hospital in northern India after a blaze broke out in the neonatal ward. It's a very short piece. It's written that officials from the Uttar Pradesh state government have announced compensation of 5 lakh rupees for the bereaved families. State Deputy Chief Minister Brajesh Pathak said a safety review of the public hospital has been carried out in February and a fire drill as recently as June. This is the second. So this is in defense, right? You read that this statement that everything with the audit of the hospital was absolutely all right. This is the second prominent hospital fire in India in 6 months when newborns have been killed. In May, 6 babies were killed in a fire at a private hospital in Delhi. So, mentioned as a matter of fact, no arrests, wherein in the home birth setting, where the mother and the baby were all right, the husband was arrested. There was police at his door, as if he'd done a crime. And the article is also not sensationalized when it's the hospital. Around the same time, a week apart, another news comes out in Hindu that 169 infants were stillborn or died soon after birth in a hospital in 10 months. 41 died in the last few months. Doctors have told the district administration that 28 babies died of various infections, 36 due to problems relating to breathing, 6 due to heart and other ailments, 6 due to indigestion of fecal matter, 11 for miscellaneous reasons, and 79 were premature. This news says that the district in charge, whoever that is, he would ask the doctors to provide an explanation in the Zilla Panchayat meeting on particular date. The state government would order an inquiry and initiate action against the doctors and officers if willful negligence was found. He also found that the government would review the functioning of the hospital and fill any vacancies of doctors and specialists. Matter of fact, no charged emotions in this news. Then, around the same time, a month's difference, Karnataka woman 28 dies a day after C-section delivery. So let's see. Karnataka woman 28 dies a day after cesarean section. Family alleges medical negligence. There have been over 3,350 maternal deaths in the last 5 years. The chief minister said her family has alleged medical negligence led to her death. In response to the allegations, the doctor, the director, has told the newspaper that that the woman's condition remained stable until Sunday morning. He confirmed that the attending doctors treated her, and he attributed her death to heart-related complications rather than medical negligence. He assured that an internal investigation would be conducted following the complaint, and there have been these many deaths in all these years. As of November 2024, the number of maternal deaths state has reduced, and they take pride in that, which is great, which is wonderful. Now, all I'm saying is that these are serious conditions. These are news articles which are covering the deaths of either babies or fire or something in a hospital. Some of them are because of negligence, and some of them can happen to anybody. There have been numerous fires of late in a couple of hospitals in India across the districts, and as I read a lot more. So if you just open the newspaper, you'll see how all these news are covered as a matter of fact. Whereas when it comes to something as a home birth being done, better questions are not being asked. So where does the problem lie? We discussed that with Effath Yasmin ma'am, and what are the possible solutions without eroding, in her own words, the autonomy that women and the family should have when they choose to birth, however, wherever they want to choose to birth, and should they be able to get the support that they deserve as a human being, as a biological, natural mammal on this earth. So we now enter into the discussion. So today we have with us Effath Yasmin ji. She's been one of the first IBCLCs of India. She's a craniosacral therapist. She's an award-winning author. She's had so many things to her name. She's been one of the first people who brought breastfeeding and the importance of breastfeeding for children out in the limelight. One of the leaders of Lalish League in India when it wasn't heard of in the beginning. And so I look up to her for so many reasons, and especially when I began as a lactation counselor. She was the first reference point for me in India. And I'm very grateful to her to be here today. How we came across this entire concept of role of media denouncing birth as unsafe in itself is there was a news article that came out and it spoke about a child dying um, in one of the home birth settings, and the verbiage around it was quite quite fancy, I'd say. And um, and then we were wondering, as people who support home births as well, as I mean, how do we also bring about the fact that physiology and birth in itself is not very well supported in the industrialized system, and when there's so much going on to bring birth into the system, how do we cater to the core essential of how do we support birth in itself and the choices of women and give respect to women in birth itself? So then I came across Effath Ma'am's article, like not article, basically a post on Instagram, which highlighted the fact that birth has always been happening like that. To look at it from a frame of completely risky is unfounded, and that's when I reached out to her, and I'm very grateful for her to be here and speak on this. So, yeah, Yasmin, ma'am, just tell us what you think about it. I mean, all this verbiage out there is quite frightening.
Right. I mean, I think we forget that there's an evolutionary evidence that's available for us for millennia, for more than thousands of years. And home beds are still the norm. Home births are still the norm across the world, right? There's a very smaller percentage of mothers who actually have births at the institution.
Mm.
But we have had this movement in India where, because we have this fear around the birth associated with it, so therefore the government is trying to prevent infant mortality, maternal
Mhm.
and infant mortality. That's the intention. The intention is to serve the community and to make sure that every mother gets the support. So the way they assumed that the best way to support them would be to get the mothers to come to the institution,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So that was the movement, and it's
Mhm.
been actively supported across the governments, right? So in when we look at that, what happens is we are sometimes kind of forgetting what our physiology, like you mentioned, what is normal, and how is it that we can best support the woman when she's during pregnancy and birth. Is there a way for us to get the support, skilled support, at the home so that they have their privacy, they are around the people who they love and care, and at the same time get the support that they require during birth?
Yeah.
So that, I think, gets missed out when we assume that everything about birth is risky. So
Mhm.
I think it's like a pendulum, no, Divya? So it's like you're moving to one extreme just because you want to take care of something, and then you miss out the opportunity for us to look at the entire spectrum of the experiences of birth that happen.
Yeah.
And it is important that we have to have something that is life saving. There's no doubt about that. That
Mhm.
some women definitely require life saving intervention, medical interventions are required. But
Mm.
what is the percentage of women who actually require that? And
Yeah.
what about the rest of them, which is the larger chunk of the pyramid, the lower part of the pyramid, the base of the pyramid, which is the the huge number of women in India or across the world for that matter, who require the support in their homes, which gives them privacy, care, and love and support that is absolutely crucial for her to have a memorable uh, something that carries on with an imprint that allows mothers to continue to trust their own bodies and intuition. But when we see that as risky and when we see that as a medical event, what then happens is women have slowly over a period of time lost their connection with their own bodies, and they fear birth almost to an extent. Today we stand at the place where we almost wonder, is it even possible for you to have a home birth,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And that's the kind of fear we have, which means that every birth has to have some kind of support, medical support, and a standby, to support the mother to go through her normal processes of her own connection with her body. So there is a lot of externalization of that connection. And
Yeah.
that's really to a point scary, I would say. Because the more we move away from our bodies and our intuition, it has a roller coaster effect that happens after birth and into parenting. And then you really don't have a confident generation of parents who are deeply connected with their children to guide them into becoming, socially engaging, trusting
Mm.
adults, confident adults in the world.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
don't necessarily realize that this has a deep imprint that comes from pregnancy and birth. So, and it plays a big role even in the healthcare, other things apart from birth, for example, any disease. And we're so far away from our own bodies, we're not connected. The mind, body, and spirit is not connected. And that's what really concerns me. And this sensationalizing of the stories of emergency, it's really infusing more fear into the system that's already laden with so much fear. Birth is driven by fear today. If that's what's happening, by these kind of stories that we are putting out, which is such isolated cases that we get to hear about it, we are putting it on top into the headlines of the newspapers, then we are sensationalizing it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that we don't do the same about if we had similar setup and similar experience in the hospital, for example. It's
Yeah.
not true that we don't lose babies in the hospital. We do. Uh, the belief that the parent can make a decision for their family, that's been eroded and sometimes snatched away from them, which is
Yeah.
very, very sad.
Yeah.
Because of the sensationalization, just imagine that family who's gone through that loss, how that mother can go into the state of guilt. And possibly she may not know how to come out of it or even resolve that at this point.
Yeah.
She's always going to second guess herself,
Yeah.
right? So I think to be able to restore the confidence in people for them to make their decision about their healthcare or their families, I think we have to make a ecosystem in such a way that people start to um, use their intuitive intelligence to make those
Mm.
decisions for themselves,
Yeah.
whatever the outcome is. But
Yeah.
we can collectively be responsible for that. And then what it means that we don't have to ignore the outcome. We can do whatever it requires for us to better the system.
Mm.
Can this be prevented? What did it need for us to prevent it? If it needed to be there, then can we take that facility and can we create that ecosystem around her so that she gets the help that she requires? But
Yeah.
beyond that, there's always a part of the law of nature, right? So we are reading too much into that. I think that's very important that this skewed representation that we have needs to be spoken about.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, it's like discouraging the mothers, the women, for considering the options that they have, or the choices, the birth choices that they have in their life.
yeah.
And I feel that is a very skewed representation, and that I think it should not be ignored and should be spoken about.
Yeah. And there's no, so when I was looking at articles from the last 1 year, there was all risk based in pretty much the same format. The husband saw the YouTube. The husband decided to carry out the birth. It was the mother's choice. Is this the patriarchy kind of speaks through the articles because it's the husband who's making the decisions. The woman is just sitting behind and following him. And then the husband, when after the loss, the husband has, there's a court case against him, clear. He's taken for interrogation, everything is mentioned. At the same time, like you said, things happen in a hospital setting also, and the news does come out. It's not as sensationalized, it's written as a matter of fact. Then, I mean, there have been so many fire episodes, no? There was some fire in the neonatal department, and then children died. These many numbers of children all of a sudden died. That is also written as a matter of fact. And then again, there's no question raised as such. I mean, what as to whether we are doing enough to ensure the safety aspect. And no trial, nobody's, taking anybody in. custody, and it's so sad that a family that took the decision is not it's not discussed, like you were saying. Why did they do what they did in the first place? And one of the things that really caught my attention when you said that, why don't we then, there are so many home births across India now that are happening for various reasons, because after two cesareans are done just like that. After the second cesarean, a woman realizes, maybe I can't even have a natural birth anymore. They are not told this. No information is given to them in the hospital that if we do this cesarean to you again, you cannot have a normal birth again in the system. So then she starts looking for her options, and sometimes she lands at a home birth because there people will support her have a normal birth. So these are the motives that it's driven by. We aren't incorporating our own bias into the system that have been supporting births. Um, so yeah, I mean, do you also think we are not talking about cesarean sections as much as we are talking about the safety of birth? And when we talk about morbidity, we are not considering. So there was one article where it was written that home births, because of home births, the morbidity is going to increase because homes are basically infectious. um, uh,
It's contrary to the reality, Divya, actually,
yeah.
because I was recently having a chat and did a podcast with Dr. Tarujin, and
Mm,
she's quite a pioneer in some of the things that have happened. If the changes that she brought in one of the hospitals in Bihar, and so her findings come in a book actually.
mm,
So it's like
yeah.
her experiment in a hospital in Bihar, and she's written about that, and it's quite startling to see the realities of what is happening in the public hospitals in India, and so on and so forth. We are also seeing the other stark, um, you know, completely different scenario where they are highly posh hospitals and private hospitals as well. So we still see, a high intervention, and then we are looking at a scenario where there's absolutely no help at all. So there's
Mm,
too little help or there's too much help.
yeah.
And
True.
both outcomes aren't really going to be supporting families.
Yeah.
So even if the government is incentivizing women to come to the hospital, we're going to find ways for women to try and escape the system and try and see if they can have a safe birth somewhere else. I've heard about it. Like I'm recently supporting a mother in Bombay. This is a metropolitan city,
Yeah.
and women usually would want to go to a very posh private hospital who can afford to do that and would go there, right? But what she says is, I'm thinking of going to my village because my mom said that I probably have a better chance of having a normal birth at the village than to
Mm,
be here in the hospital and then
mm,
possibly end up with a cesarean section. And this happens to be her second baby,
mm,
and the first baby was a cesarean section. And so it's not that she's not had an experience of it. She's had an
yeah.
experience of a birth, which was a cesarean section. And then she decides to say, how can I find a way to escape this being under the knife?
Yeah.
And so it speaks volumes for me. And so she says, I'm towing between what do I do? Can I stay here or should I just go back and just be with at the care of my mom? And then she said that, if you're in the village, possibly the bigger chances that you're going to have a normal birth, even at home, possibly. So why don't you just come? So she's thinking about going back maybe there. But the reason why she hesitates is because she has a family, she has an older child. So there are a lot of other things that come play a role there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the reality is, the Zeren section, like you mentioned, isn't really spoken about as much as it should be spoken about. Now, I was looking at the National Health Survey in 2016, 15, 16, and then 1921. That's the last survey that we did. So every 4 years, there is a National Health Family Health Survey that happens. We're looking at different numbers there. You're looking at a very high number of, say, about 21%. And I'm talking overall, just not considering about the, huge numbers that will come out of a private hospital sector and the public sector. But on overall basis, we have a number of 21% uh, average number, starting from 17% to 21%,
Mm,
moving upwards of cesarean sections across India.
Yeah.
And if I then demarcate it into private hospitals and public hospitals, it's
Yeah.
an increase in both the sectors, in public
Yeah.
hospitals as well. And then we're also seeing a very high number, up to 70 to 80% of babies being born with cesarean sections in private hospitals.
Yeah.
So that's a huge number, and it speaks volumes to look at it. So, what are the different reasons that they are kind of placing up? The number one reason being fear of labor. So, you're kind of playing up on the fears of women of being disconnected from their own bodies. And then we are having this language in the media that
Mm.
either films or social messages that are coming out, like you rightly mentioned, that media plays a huge role in how we portray certain experiences in life. So while it can be a small section of how they can be in reality in terms of its experiences, we are spreading it across the psyche of the women basically.
Mm.
So they always see birth to be scary,
Mm.
screaming on the bed, perhaps, you know. And if a young child is watching that or a young girl is watching that, she's obviously not going to want to have that kind of experience. She's
Yeah.
going to find a way to cut across the pain.
Yeah.
We don't see pain as a guiding factor there,
Yeah. We don't.
right? We
Yeah.
attach another aspect of it, which is more a mental aspect of looking at pain as a guiding physiological process to maybe even a struggle
Mm.
or even suffering for that matter.
Yeah.
So then you have outcomes of it. What are the outcomes? They would give the message that you can have a painless birth, and then these are the kind of medications that we can introduce to you to make it easier for you,
Yeah.
right? I'm sorry. And when women take those choices, what then happens is that, and this has happened with me as well, as I know, as personally, because most women are not educated,
Yeah.
childbirth educated. We are not.
And
We
yeah.
see that as a natural process of life. I should be able to trust the systems that are around me, so I can kind of just be, experiencing what I have to experience while everybody else is there to support me. But if I have to be hyper vigilant and I have to constantly be looking at what kind of choices are the my care providers are going to take for me, and
Mm.
I'm going to give them a flow chart to, decide if this happens, this is how it's going to be. That's what birth plans are.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but we are coming to a point where we have to do that,
Yeah. Yeah. We have to
right?
do.
So we have to do that, but that also means that the young parents have to go through a load and turn around a lot of research work just to
Yeah.
understand how to make those decisions,
Yeah.
and that's a burden on the
That's a bad.
society and the community. It's
Yeah.
definitely a burden. We
Yeah.
want them to be well informed, but that well informed, it does not come easy. It doesn't come easy.
Doesn't. And also
And you
that.
feel the sense of betrayal at the end of it, like saying, okay, this is what I thought it's going to be like, but it turned out to be like, okay, I was supposed to have a painless birth, and but then I'm feeling disconnected with my own baby. I'm feeling disconnected with my own body. What's going on here? You know? So then she starts to introspect upon her own self, and that's when she makes a decision that I want to do something that's not going to dissociate me from my own body and my own experience.
Yeah.
That's when she looks for options, right? And so we are not listening in to those women. We aren't listening in.
Yeah.
So unless we are deeply listening into what their experiences need to be and how they want it to be, I don't think we can create that kind of systems around us.
Yeah.
And those systems that are available for us, we aren't inclusive of them and we're not upskilling them.
We aren't. Like
Like
the
the diet
existing
system that we
institutions.
have, it's an eroding traditional, you know, skill. It's no more there. I think many of the villages around in India, probably they'll be the last generation of maybe the dive,
Yeah.
perhaps
And
not as well.
yeah.
So we have lost a millennia of art of supporting a mother during birth and breastfeeding, and at the same time, we have lost an enriching tradition of support around that. What a normal, natural birth looks like. It's not even there in our understanding anymore.
Sadly.
So everything seems like there has to be some sort of an intervention, right? And that intervention doesn't start at birth alone, Divya. You have to go upstream backward and see what we start with, starting from conception onward,
Yeah.
like from starting from the contraception part of it.
Yeah.
There are so many medical interventions that are introduced right at that time, starting from pills to devices, the IUD devices, contraceptive pills, and many other things that are there in the market, in the industry. So you kind of, there is a lot of commercialization that starts right from there,
Yeah.
and the impacts that it has on the fertility of the woman is not often looked at even.
Yeah.
And that's a high rising number as well. Just like you have cesarean sections rising numbers, you also have infertility numbers rising up. And then to bridge the gap, you have other things that are coming in. For example, uh, the entire fertility industry that is working behind to support the parent. You
Yeah.
know, freeze the eggs, ovulations and IUIs and IVFs and surrogacy. There's a
Yeah.
whole line of products, and I call them products because they truly are.
They are.
We look at it that they're working on the psychology and the emotional aspect of the need of the parent to wish to have a baby and to increase their family. This is how the products are available out there for us.
Yeah.
Without realizing that there is no deep connection, there's no continuity of care across what we are intervening,
And the side
right?
effects of
Though,
all of
yeah,
it.
absolutely. There's so many side effects. It doesn't mean that there is no place for it. There's definitely a place for everything, every support that we want to provide, but it needs to have a continuity of care. For example, let me put it this way. The very often I give this example to parents who come in my clinic is if you had a fracture, let's say you had a fracture in the hand or leg, you are put in a cast. That's the line of treatment we have, right? So if it's put in cast, it means that you're going to immobilize that part of the body for approximately 6 to 8 weeks for it to heal, which is okay. I mean, it's required at that point. But what we also do after that is to create a system of care, a continuity of care that allows you to then recreate that mobility that the body and the muscles and the tissues and the fluid systems within that area, which is immobile for about 6 to 8 weeks, to be remobilized again, which is the continuity of care that is required. Now, when you look at birth, right, you medicalize the conception, you medicalize the pregnancy, you've medicalized labor and birth, and then post that you expect everything else to happen naturally after.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I work in that field of
Yeah.
mother feeding and breastfeeding, I see that downstream what's happening. That's because of the line of things that have happened right behind.
Yeah. Mm.
And there's absolutely no continuity of care. And look at the high numbers of young women aged 20 to 25 years on thyroid medications today, you know? So I wonder, Divya, if women today, uh, can escape a pill, a vaccine, or being under the knife as a part of normal life. I'm talking about. And that's pretty scary to think that this is the only way to kind of lead life. Um, I think we need to raise the consciousness and awareness for the women to recognize that um, they have this deep intuitive sense within them and the wisdom in the body that can allow them to gain connection and continuity of what they can represent themselves in their own life.
Yeah. It hit
So
me
yeah,
hard.
yeah, so it's like sort of a reclaim. You're reclaiming your power of being the human being and the woman, and that changes the entire trajectory of her life and the trajectory of the community. I think,
Yeah.
and this needs to be spoken about. I really feel that way.
Yes. And it hit me really hard when you said um, maybe women can't escape a pill, or they have the burden of maintaining fertility or controlling the population. They have the burden of carrying the pregnancy. It has come across as a burden, and then not to be able to escape the knife. It hit me so hard because I was also that one person who went into the system thinking the ecosystem will guide me how birth will happen, and that's almost always on the contrary, because the system is also still trying to figure out how birth happens. They don't know.
Yeah.
It's so sad. And
Yeah. They have the best intentions, Divya. That's the point that you have to
yeah,
make.
of
Because you
course.
can see that their hospitals are overcrowded. They
Yeah,
don't have the facilities. They don't have the ratio of numbers that we require, like
yeah.
the number of doctors to versus the number of women who need
Women.
birthing facilities. So
True.
therefore, what happens is uh, you have overcrowded facilities. So you're putting the burden onto one sector of the healthcare system and expecting them to bring in empathy and care and patience along, which is absolutely required during
Mm.
birth. And I think we are placing an unrealistic expectation on the medical
Yeah,
system. I really
yeah,
feel that way. So if we can bring a system that is collaborative, that a large number of mothers who are who require support to be given at
mm,
home with skilled
mm,
care, midwifery
mm,
care at
mm.
home, and kept them close to facilities if they require support to come to the facility. Then what happens is you're recalibrating that burden that we have placed on
Yeah,
one part of the community, the
yeah.
healthcare system, right? The system is
It
lopsided,
is.
and so you're not bringing in the care that can be given from there, and then you're exposing those mother and baby to you know the supposed sanitized space in the hospital, but that's really not the
Yeah,
case because it's overburdened,
yeah,
like I said, right? So if we recalibrate that and think of a system that's more integrated, I think it will be a fantastic solution. And so that means that the stakeholders involved, whether it's in the policy making or you're looking at people who are um, skilled support or the DIE system that's already present, if there is whatever is remaining, if we can upskill them, bring them into the system and keep a monitoring
mhm,
process, and send them into the communities who are not working in isolation but working with the system, then I think there's going to be a lot more balance that we can kind of hope to
yeah,
have. But that's for the policymakers
yeah,
to listen
yeah,
up to, to understand that this is what is required. And we as a community need to really raise up and hold each other's hands to be able to support this kind of movement to come in. I
yeah.
think so. Yes.
There's a clear demarcation here you've made, Yasmin ma'am, that there can be a system of midwives or people trained in supporting physiological birth at home and emergency care that comes with the medical system. One of the things we do explain women is you need to know how birth happens because the medical system is there to take care of the emergencies. It is trained in that.
Mm,
It's not necessarily trained in carrying out or facilitating a physiological birth, which we often go to the medical facility hoping that it would help us with. It doesn't come from that space. So yeah,
mm.
maybe also making that demarcation rather than carrying everything out as safe, um, that would
Mm.
also help because we're not looking at the medical system with that lens as yet. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I absolutely feel so. We need to give it its place where it actually deserves to be because they're meant to give us that, a safety valve in that process of the medical care system where we are, where we are kind of, what would I say, supporting the mothers who absolutely need the life-saving, intervention, right? And we need to re, re-establish the trust that the system is
Yeah,
required.
yeah.
We're losing this system as well as that system actually. So we really don't have trust
No, we
anywhere.
don't.
And so then the women have to take charge of their own selves. And then you really, so what's happening is there's a lot of isolation. So we need to have an integrated system where it's a maternal centered care, and you have the second line of support around the medical ecosystem, which is the midwifery care, and then which is skilled care, and then there's also the system of the medical system, which is hospital care that needs to be provided for life saving intervention. So then we are reinfusing and restoring the trust that needs to be there across all layers of medical healthcare
Yeah.
system. I think that would be a fantastic integrated model. And we will move towards it, Divya. There's no doubt about it. But how long it's going to take? No, I'm not sure about
Yeah.
that. But we will move towards that
Yeah.
someday.
Yeah, love that. And you also spoke at some point about the pain aspect, how women are from today in the social media. I follow these women's groups and these period talk groups on the internet, and often what I see is again sensationalizing the pain as a hindrance to the life of a woman. And in all of this, which something that I wanted to ask you, because when we talk about breastfeeding and a baby, that's also where the disconnect passes on when it begins with the menarche. So we are not looking at the spiritual and the emotional aspects of all of these things, that maybe rest, maybe crying during right before you have um, a period is what a woman was supposed to do, cry out her whatever she's feeling, expressing her anger or emotions. Maybe they're directing her to something. So so when we are looking at our bodies as a burden throughout, right from our teenage years, where are we landing? So what would you like to say to that? I mean,
So I think it's the I think we often forget the resilient processes that happen within our body and our mind. There is a continuous physiological processes that are occurring in our body throughout the entire, the cycle of the menstruation, right? For women especially, and from the time they start that. That's a part of the natural processes that are occurring in the body. So if we have the language, I think the languaging becomes so crucial, Divya. I think that's very, very important for us to kind of be mindful of the language that we use around it, even in the community for that matter, families and communities, right? So there's a lot of fear and burden and pain that's associated with that. And there's a disconnection that starts right there that these are not natural processes, or they are natural processes but not powerful or not natural. We can do something about it. It's a burden, and so we need to do something about it, and we will give you the solutions for that. So that's how we undermine women's confidence in their own bodies, and body autonomy plays a big role and perpetuate a kind of a fear cycle, psychosis, and a culture that mistrusts their own body. I think that's an important point to think about. And young girls often, if you talk about pain during their monthly cycles, they start to see it as a burden. They think of it like, okay, it's there. I don't know,
mhm,
it's there. Let's just get over with it, rather than embracing that experience. Right? It's an inherent resilient cycle that happens inside the woman's body and their emotional self. And women need to be given that uh, restorative, deeper understanding of it, I think, than to give the language that dissociates them from their own bodies. Like you said, it plays a big role, not only during pregnancy, conception. So automatically, I'm externalizing who's going to make decisions about what's going to happen during my pregnancy, what's going to happen during my labor, what's going to happen after birth, right? How many babies are put through formula for that matter at the hospital? I'm telling you, Divya, in the last 14 plus years of my work as a lactation consultant, I'm at least, I mean, I can say that the mothers who come to me are definitely skewed population because I'm not having regular mothers coming into my clinic. Obviously, the ones who are coming in need
yeah,
help, but there hasn't been a case where they come by saying that, wherever I was giving birth, the ecosystem around me gave me the confidence that the baby can be fed and my body is enough for the nutrition. That the messaging that is given to the mothers is you don't have enough milk,
Yeah.
so therefore you need to give formula from outside. So almost all babies who have come to my clinic have had some taste of the formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is something that we are not recognizing is a deep plunging in of that mother into what we call the grief of loss of breastfeeding,
Yes. Yeah.
and we often don't talk about that. And grief is a phenomenal experience for anyone to have. And we have postpartum depression that's linked with that. And recently, when I had gone to support a hospital, a public hospital, with a maternal hospital, we're looking at training the nurses there to be able to take care of the mothers. I was pretty surprised and shocked to see that they have a whole department, a whole different public building inside a hospital, which is dedicated for maternal mental health. And this is public hospital.
Ah. Ah.
So a public hospital is already overcrowded and overburdened. Even in such a system, they have seen the importance of need to have a separate department just taking care of the mental health. What does it speak about? What does this speak about the whole community? This speaks about how much that is needed, and even a public system couldn't ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I saw that, my heart really sank, and it's quite epidemic to see the number of mothers who experience this postpartum sort of depression, and to an extent of different spectrum of it, starting from just feeling baby blues to moving to actual depression, and then also to the level of having postpartum psychosis.
Yeah.
That there you require some sort of medical intervention again. So there's a rising number as well. And the deep connection between postpartum depression is what the mother feels about herself, and the connection that she has with her baby as
Yeah.
a bond, and the fact that she's not able to nurture her baby at her
Yeah.
breast, leaves her at a physiological dump in her mind that possibly I've lost my baby.
But it's unrecognized. She doesn't know it yet. She just feels it.
It's not recognized. She doesn't realize. She can see the baby in front of her, but her brain is telling her that, maybe I've lost my baby, and she's going into that depressive state in her mind, and she's not able to make that connection that, what, this is not how it is. And so it takes a lot of effort for mothers to kind of overcome that feeling, Divya. And this is not often spoken
No.
about. This is often never spoken about. That is a very deep link of grief of breastfeeding.
Yeah.
We aren't
Yeah.
addressing that. And so when we are comparing between cesarean sections or interventions to natural birth, for
Mm.
example, the initiation process of breastfeeding really is remarkably different from this to that. Mothers who have had natural birth often are given close connection with their babies for the first few hours, which is like really the golden period for mother and baby to bond. Very alert state of a baby, and baby seeks the mother. Naturally, if the baby is put on the abdomen of the mother, the baby will find the breast. And so it elicits almost all the many of the primitive reflexes in the baby that allows that connection and the neural connections to happen, that makes it like a pathway, a learning pathway for baby to know this is the way to get to food, this is the way to connect, this is the way to receive the emotional need satisfied. So all of those processes are put in place,
Yeah.
right? And that's missed if there is an intervention. Very understandably so, because if there is a medical intervention, you have to be in a facility where there's a hyper alertness of everything that happens around, because it's a life saving
Yeah.
process,
Mm.
right? If there's a life saving process, you have to intervene. So you have to make sure that the baby is okay, baby is fine, and the life of the baby is more important than the other processes. But if every baby is put through that, or most babies are put through that, then you're losing the connection between the mother and baby. So that's like number one,
Yeah.
separation between mother and baby, eliciting an anxious response in the baby and mother. And so the the first response in the baby's brain is of distress. There's no sense of safety.
Yeah.
And so, what is the primal forces that are going to play that if I come into this world, I don't sense the sense of safety first.
Mm.
And so, my entire life, I'm going to base myself on that primal
Yeah.
influence, right? And what does this speak about the levels of depression that we have across
Children that
the
grow.
community?
Yeah. Young.
Children, very young children are being put on
Yeah.
medication, needing constant support in schools
Yeah.
today, and higher rates of suicide, higher rates of addiction.
Yeah.
So we cannot ignore that. We cannot ignore that. And there is enough evidence that links it back to the kind of care that we
Right.
require. And our pre and perinatal psychology today is a separate field of its own. So we have to look at that intervention and see if we can kind of link it all together when we do a policy making, for
Mm.
example. I don't think we're dipping into the resources that are already
We've
available.
been for quite a while.
So
I mean, these resources have been around.
it takes about 15, 20 years for any research that's established research for it to come into the clinical practice. It takes close to about 15, 20 years for it to percolate down. It can be made much faster because we have more internet facilities today and technology is highly advanced today. Having said that, there's also an industry of, uh, you know, not trustworthy research that's been put out there as well. Again, driven by industry, I think industry based and not medical based.
Yeah.
So that's another unfortunate trend
Yeah.
that we're seeing.
On that, I'd like to ask you, especially on the breastfeeding aspect also. So there are two questions that come to my mind when you speak about the separation with babies, and then there's an entire um, again another science or another aspect that has come out there wherein we, how are we parenting children, the separation anxiety comes in, it all begins from birth. One of the questions that it brings me on is, can we do the checks on the mom herself if the baby is relatively just fine? Mm, having the baby on the mother,
Could you?
like having the baby on the mother
Yeah.
while
So
the initial checkups have to be done, why can't they be done?
oh, absolutely. Because yeah, we do have beautiful protocols that are coming in with some very pioneers that are working in the field of natural birth. And so they are trying to see if we can have gentle cesarean section protocols. If there is a cesarean section that needs to be done, how can it be done more gently, more without separation, and how can we initiate the golden period of being able to get the mother and baby to bond. So all the this is not just here, but also if you go back to looking at premature birth, for example, we are having a high rise of premature birth as
Yes.
well. That's another concerning trend that we see, right? Dr. Neil Bergsman from South Africa is a great colleague and a dear friend as well. I've been watching him do some fantastic work in the field of, you know, kangaroo mother care. And whenever I've had, I mean, we've looked at his papers. There's a lot of research that he's been putting out, and he's looking at how can we facilitate low, low intervention, even for premature babies, where continued care is given in the mother's on the mother's body. So the mother's body becomes the incubator, low tech kind of a response to that. And this started out as a response in the hospital because they didn't have the money to put in to get the higher intervention. But amazingly, the result was that they have a better outcome.
Wow. Better outcome.
Better outcome. For as I'm talking about premature babies as small as 23-week old, 23
Yeah.
weekers, 23-week gestation period. I'm
Yeah.
talking very very
Yeah.
early. Babies as small as say about 700 grams, 800-gram
Yeah.
baby. Starting from there, have a higher chance of survival, higher chance of a better outcome from that premature birth just by kangaroo mother care. And the kangaroo mother care is not just for babies who are in premature. This can be then interpolated to even naturally full term babies being born. So my recommendation to mothers would be that if you're in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, 24 hours of care can be given on mother's body, at least at the time that she's in the hospital. If that can be incorporated, just one change, Divya, that alone can be a game
yeah,
changer for babies to be able to return to their natural habitat being the mother's body, to provide them the care and the warmth and rebalancing of the physiological processes such as heartbeat, breathing, oxygenation in the body, all of that to start to rebalance
yeah,
itself, and their neural pathways to recalibrate itself to find safety, even if there have been interventions given
yeah,
to us. We can
yeah,
recalibrate that. And babies have this primitive response to crawl on the mother's abdomen and reach the breast for easily up to 6 weeks, Divya. There is enough time for us to do that,
yeah,
right? So if we can incorporate smaller changes, I think they can be very transformational. And we just need to have that understanding of it. I think that education has to be given. And if our listeners are listening into these are some of the very key ways of how we can restore that experience that babies and mothers require. And because too little help for mothers who don't have the help, they are losing babies. There's no doubt about that. And we are losing mothers at birth as well. So there is a need for that intervention. When there is a need for that intervention, can we then restore those processes that are required?
yeah,
So they are like into a safe space after that, the channel of the parenting that they require to, carry
yeah,
forward and restore that breastfeeding. Numbers of breastfeeding can show you that that's not
yeah,
happening. At National Family Health Survey, the last one, which I told you about, 2019 to 2021, that happened, it's showing you a number of 42% at 6 months.
oh,
Exclusive breastfeeding standing at 42%
pretty
in
low.
India. And I would assume that is still not completely exclusive. It could be
Yeah,
mixed feeding, I would
yeah,
assume. So that's the number that we're standing at. Even though we have very high rates of mothers wanting to breastfeed, anywhere close to about 97 to 98% mothers wanting to
yeah,
breastfeed at
at
birth.
birth.
We start with that number and we stand at 42% at the end of
Yeah.
6 months.
Um, you said earlier that there's a lot of intervention that comes in the hospital, and that kind of changes the trajectory of breastfeeding for mums because they're clueless. They need help, and the language around "you don't have enough milk." We spoke about the premature babies and the babies born out of cesarean sections, but it also happens in certain hospitals that they separate the mother and the baby out of it's changing now definitely, but it's still there in certain hospitals. They'll take the baby away from the mom for at least an hour or so after birth. Can we also make sure that all of that, for a healthy baby, all of that checkup can be done on the mom and
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. That in everything that you require to do, whatever interventions have to be done, whether it's a premature baby or a full-term
yeah,
baby, all of those checkups can be done on mother's body. So if we can make that simple change, I think we can restore a lot of hope back into the processes that we go through in life. Just that confidence for a mother that she has, her body can produce the milk, the body is equipped to produce that, and body is equipped to take care of that baby. So that I think we need to reclaim that trust that the body is
yeah,
required
yeah,
and the wisdom that the body has.
yeah. Yeah. Do you think so? There's often a low milk supply issue that also pops up in a lot of groups. The mother's first um, impression of breastfeeding is whether I'll have enough milk or not. Do you really think low milk supply is really an issue, or it's just the fact that women are not educated and not supported enough that they end up having the issues that seem like
So I would say it's a combination of both, Divya. Like everything else, it's
yeah,
a combination of both. If we have, uh, you know, thyroid issues starting right at a very young age, and they are under, long-term pills, medications that are given to them, it is definitely going to have a hormonal
mm,
imbalance. There's no doubt about it. Then, if you have, fear and other things that are going around the cycles of a woman in terms of her periodic monthly cycles, which are driven by, the fragile balance of the hormonal system again. So then, if you have irregular periods, if you have thyroid issues starting very, very early, there is going to be some physiological impact in terms of supply. There's no doubt about it, right? That's one part of it. But there's also a large part of it which is a perceived fear of not being able to give enough. And we need to, and instead of telling the mothers like it's a, you know, you're really not trusting your bodies, instead of doing that, how can we gently return that balance back? There has to be a non-judging, unbiased approach, gentle approach towards
Yeah.
women to return that intuitive understanding about their own body. So everything is measured in our life. Everything is goal oriented, objective oriented, right? So therefore, I often tell the mothers, like, your breasts aren't really going to have markers like a bottle has, like how many ounces of milk, you have, right? It's not meant to be that way. But you have an objective way of looking at how much is my baby getting enough.
Mm.
Instead of thinking it is very subjective, you can look at it from an objective one. What is the number one reason? The number one parameter that you can look for is whether your baby is well hydrated and the urine color of the urine is not yellow and it's not dark in color and it's not scanty. So you know that there is definitely enough hydration going on. Yeah, so that's the number one parameter, right? The second parameter is that you're going to have bowels, and bowels won't move until you really have enough. Like you really have to eat for you to have the bowel movement. So mothers need to know that. That's the second part. The third is the baby's going to gain enough weight. And when I say enough weight, let me give you what the WHO, the World Health Organization, gives exclusive breastfeeding babies. What are the ranges that they have? Anywhere between 0 to 3 months, you're going to see babies. So first of all, when babies are born, they have a certain birth weight, and you're going to lose approximately about 3% to 5% of weight during after
Mm.
birth. And if there is sometimes intervention, you might go up to 8% or so. And the highest marker for you to look for is anything about 8-9%. 10% is higher. The losing weight at 10% is, it needs to be looked at. It needs closer support and monitoring. But anywhere between, and then to regain that toward the birth weight, approximately takes about 7 days to about maximum 2 weeks time, right? And you need to have this marker given to the mother so she knows about it. And then post that, you're going to start to gain weight approximately about 150 grams to about 200 grams a week,
Mm.
up to 3 months. Now, after that, you're going to see a number going a little bit lower, anywhere between 120 grams to about 150 grams.
Yeah.
This is the number that you see up to about 6 months. And then again, it drops. See? So, what happens is the exclusive breastfeeding period of 6 months, if mothers are aware that this is what I need to look at, then what happens is that she's not comparing herself with other babies who are possibly having mixed feeding or babies who are having formula, for example. Those numbers are different. It cannot be compared with these numbers. And you're going to see a leaner, happier, active baby who's mother fed than the one who is possibly going to be a more chubbier, cuter, heavier baby who's going to be from the formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
Possibly, right? So sometimes it confuses her. But these numbers can give you. So these are objective numbers. They're not subjective.
Yeah.
You can clearly see them. But the number four, the fourth factor, which I think is the most important for mothers, is she is going to keep being hyper vigilant until her baby has a good sleep, feed, play cycle. So if a baby is not satisfied and if baby is not sleeping well, then she goes into the state of saying, definitely it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And I think it's going to be reiterated by everybody else that's messaging the same thing in their household. Because if the baby is not being satisfied and sleepy, then it concerns everybody that's around. And the baby is in distress. And if the baby is constantly distressed, it's going to be read as you don't have enough
Yeah.
milk, right? So I don't think we can dismiss the understanding, but we need to hear them out, listen to what they have to say, and then read into their observations, and then start to see what is the kind of coherence that we require in terms of body, dynamic, the mother and baby dynamic. How is the feed happening? Is there an efficient feed? Now, that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
Then, you know, we're looking at all of those parameters which are completely different. But we're looking at the, you know, biomechanical processes that go
Mm.
on, right? The muscle and the coherence in the body, the coordination of the muscles, coordination of the tissues, and how they are efficiently latching and feeding. All of these, factors play a role. But for a mother, she's only going to look at it as, I think I don't have enough milk. My baby is not
Yeah.
satisfied, and that's okay because that's what a mother
Yeah.
can see. But when she reaches out for help, that's when all of these things need to be broken down to see where is it coming from, what's the kind of backstory
Mm.
she's had, what kind of pregnancy did she have, what kind of medication was given to her, what kind of interventions were done during labor and birth, what happened after birth in the hospital if she was in a hospital, what happened if she was in a home birth. All of these things have to be considered and looked at and then
Yeah.
supported. You see? So it can never be one solution fit all. It's not possible. We have to know to individualize our care
Yeah.
for the mother, right? That's
Mm.
important. And that's when the right help is received for that particular baby. So every mother and baby who's touched upon, who can be restored with the care that we can provide for them. And I mean, it really adds up to the numbers that we're looking at on an overall,
Yeah.
rather than to just become a statistical
Yeah.
number.
So, we've spoken. We began with home births and how the media is playing a role to how all of that somewhere has affected the breastfeeding and the baby and how the mother feels, the overall health of the woman postpartum. If I kind of club all of this together, so when it comes to the language throughout, um, what would you say that, and also with individual care, like you're saying, what would you say to if the policymakers somehow listen to this, and if all the women are listening to this, what would you say to them as the first step when they're venturing into pregnancy, birth? What should they do as a precursor, or how would you like suggest them with so much noise around them?
Yeah, there's so much noise. Yeah, absolutely. And it's very challenging to kind of move the noise away and then start to listen to their own intuitive sense first, right? But I don't think we can expect for us to just move into that without giving them right sense of education. I think reaching out for good education is the start point always, right? So reach out to the evidence-based knowledge that is available, and that means that we need to have to be able to reach out to the right communities, the right channels of information, the right sources of information becomes very, very critical. Where are we getting the source of information from? Is it coming from popular media? Is it coming from media that is being mindful, as a mindful media that's being putting out information for you? So today we have access to all of it. Divya. But because we have access to everything, there's always noise that can come up as well, right? So I think it's very important for us to uh, learn how to choose our care provider.
Mm.
That's the first point, right? First, knowing that I have choices. The second is me knowing that I can choose the care providers, and then establishing the trust factors with that ecosystem once it's created, then relying upon them and trusting the process. Because often what happens is you're hyper alert, and you can't believe or you can't trust the system, quite understandably. And then I have chosen the care providers, but I'm continuing to be in hyper vigilant all the time. And then expecting that just having a care provider who believes in natural birth is going to turn around your birth to a
Yeah.
natural birth. That's not going to happen because the autonomy lies with you and you need to retain that. The rest of the people around you, however skilled
Mm.
they are your support system. They cannot lead your autonomy into. That's not possible. And I think it's a very important message to women that they need to understand that you cannot buy a natural birth. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You see? So I can go to great lengths to be in the best
Mm.
place and still have an experience that is contrary to what I believed it's going to be like. and then again externalize that by saying, you know what, I didn't get what I wanted, right? So I think it's important to also embrace the uncertainty that is around natural processes in
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
There is an uncertainty around it. And so what we can do is to reclaim our, reclaim the wisdom within ourselves, and then create that ecosystem that can support that wisdom and retain that autonomy within yourself to be the active participant in your birth and believing in knowing that the pain that you're experiencing during labor and birth is your guiding factor. Your body and the pain can maneuver around that and then find a way with the support that you
yeah,
have. And also knowing that with that intuitive sense, if you retain the autonomy, you also know when to ask for intervention.
yeah,
Because that's another thing. Because I have mothers who come here and say, my husband forced me to have natural birth, and but during labor, I knew that I needed extra help, but I wasn't given that extra help. And then, while I had a natural birth, but my experience of that natural birth is not the same as you think it's supposed to be. So assuming that there's trauma associated with only intervention birth isn't really
yeah.
true.
That's another
There
spectrum.
can also be trauma in
Yeah, home
natural
birth
birth.
settings as well. We do tell women.
Home birth,
Mm.
not just home birth settings. You can have natural birth even
Hospital.
at, I'm talking about vaginal birth in
Yeah,
hospital, and you still can be
yeah,
experiencing that. So it's not about the outcome of it or the mode of what we are doing, but I think it's the experience that goes with it, right? How are we supporting what the mother requires at
yeah,
that point, and trusting the process and giving her that support is more important than be attached to a certain outcome that this is how it's
yeah,
meant to be.
yeah.
And this is not just for the mother and women. I think the women and the mothers. I think this message to go out is also for the birth workers and birth people.
Yes, definitely. Listen to the woman. What is she saying? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is she saying? What's she looking for, and what kind of support does she require? And can we help her and guide her to be closer to what she wants to experience, but at the same time provide what she requires at that point? You can't really, you cannot have downloading of all this information when she's at, say, 38 weeks
Yeah,
pregnant gestation and say, you know what, your care provider is not right, and you're supposed to have natural birth, and this is the only way to do that, and change your provider, change your hospital, and make sure that you have birth support. All of this at a time when she is going to be welcoming her baby. It's just a matter of 2 weeks. I think that's a huge
yeah.
disservice to her.
I agree with that. And also on that note, I do get a lot of moms who come to me at 36, 37 weeks for childbirth classes. And it's an entire work within those weeks to begin at. So choosing to start your education earlier is also helpful because,
Very, very important. I think we need to go right upstream to into schools, in high schools and colleges, and then definitely during the time that they're starting their thinking of their families. I think at that time is very, very crucial. And if you're looking for childbirth education, it has to happen during early
yeah,
pregnancy.
and that's how we'll change the language around birth throughout. Um, Thank you so much, Yasmin, ma'am. Just to as an end note, I want to ask this very essential question, which is also kind of tricky, but I still want to ask you for your views on it. We are looking at birth and even all of the spectrums of birth and breastfeeding and babies and health of the baby, all of this from a lens of high risk for everyone.
Hmm,
Do you think
hmm.
it is really, when we follow the natural and the physiological process, is it on a bigger spectrum, all of it as risky as we're looking at it today?
I think we have to take a measured understanding of this today, like I mentioned to you, right? So it's not uh, we we cannot demarcate this by saying, you know what, if we follow this, this is the outcome you're going to have. You're more likely going to be there. You're more likely going to
Yeah.
experience that because you can really trust the processes that go on within the body. But having said that, you cannot move away or turn your eye to the other side of the upstream things that are happening, where the interventions have happened right from the beginning, and you've had, you've had interventions at a very very early stages of your young adulthood, then expecting things to become physiologically and then fall back on physiology at birth is not really a very realistic understanding of
Yeah.
the present. So I think more likely, like you're putting it across here, that if we follow the wisdom of the body and support the women, very likely that you're going to have a very large number who can be restored for both birth as well as for mother feeding after. But to think of it like it's going to be nil, I don't think that's a very realistic
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah, love
So
that. Thank you so much, Yasmin ma'am, for doing this, for coming on board. I'm really eternally
thank you
grateful.
so much. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me here, and I had a wonderful, enriching time
yeah.
speaking to you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
You have the good rest of the day.
Understanding the subject of autonomy when it comes to childbirth and when it comes to our entire lifespan, and especially when we become a parent, is the basis of choosing how and where we want to birth. And also then listening to ourselves, to our intuition, to our inner guidance as to where we belong, and switching between our options without any social pressure should be the way to go ahead when we talk about a fine balance between having the best of services to people when they really, really need it and not losing one for the sake of the other. With that insightful episode, I request you to drop us a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if this means something to you, if this helps you in your journey. You can also make us a donation by going to our website, birthugly.com, and going to the tab podcast. You'll find a way to be able to make a donation for Indian users and for international subscribers. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much. A new mini course of childbirth classes is out. And for all of those who've subscribed to the newsletter, the Birth Ramp, which will be out very soon, you'll all have a glimpse of what that new mini labor management course looks like. So thank you so much for listening in. There is a field beyond fear where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.